One Piece is one of the longest manga series that has been put to paper with over 1,000 chapters over the span of more than 100 volumes, with over 30 arcs and counting. Luffy and crew have gone through the One Piece world from East Blue to the Grand Line to the New World. They have traveled 10,000 meters into the sky to Skypiea. They have traveled 10,000 meters down into the sea to Fishman Island. They have fought in deserts, in snow, in jails, on ships. They have fought clowns, sharks, dragons, dinosaurs, giant zombies, cyborgs, and even ninjas. The One Piece world is so vast that it's hard to choose what impacted me the most. But here's my attempt. Hello everyone, this is a Sad Pirate King here, and I hope you're having a great day, week, month, or even a year so far. Here is my top 5 One Piece arcs. Now I know that most of you will not agree with this list, but it's my list, so I'm going to be honest with it. This was the first arc where I fell in love with One Piece. Not because of any other reason than Nami. This cemented her as one of my favorite female manga characters at this time. To this point, we've seen different sad stories with Sanji, Usopp, Zoro, but Nami's really did hit me hard. Going through her life, she becomes an orphan so young and never knew her parents. Her adoptive mother, Belmere, saved her and Nojiko, and they became a family. She felt the burden of being poor and not being able to live the life to the extent that she wanted. She felt the utter heartbreak seeing her mother murdered in front of her, to save and to protect them one last time, right after she renounced Belmere for not being her real mother. She then took the burden of the town itself and enslaved herself to her mother's murderer to try to free her people. All this comes crashing down and all her hope eroded in front of her when Arlong betrayed her. When she is stabbing her arm and then she finally spoke those legendary words, "Help me," it was the first time I teared up with One Piece, but of course it won't be my last. When Luffy accepts her plea, they all march down to Arlong Park. This was the true birth of the Straw Hat Pirates. The fight and everything around these scenes don't matter to me as much. They become an afterthought to me. Arlong Park will always sit near the top, and Nami is the main reason I love this arc. Skypiea now has been revived as a good or great arc in recent times since the implications that it has in lore and different theories that have been brought to light. I love the mystery and the lore that comes with Skypiea, but to be honest, I just thought it was a cool arc. It expanded on what could be possible and opened the world building aspect to One Piece to me. This island was so far removed from everything else that was happening in the sea below it, they didn't have any indication of pirates, the government, or anything. They were their own entity, they had their history, their problems. It was amazing to get to see this. This arc also introduced the moon as a plot point, and we now know that the moon does indeed have life on it and a history on itself. This arc also gives us the location and introduction to one of the ancient weapons, Poseidon. And we find out that Roger's pirates ventured up to Skypiea as well, and they even left a note on the side of the Golden Bell in the same language as the poneglyphs, opening up so many questions. This arc had so much. I haven't even mentioned Nolan and everything that happens with him. It's incredible. And finally, I love the villain. Although we have already seen the power of Logia users of Smoker, Enel was the first villain that stroked fear into me for the Straw Hats. Although the outcome was obvious, and since Luffy was made of rubber, they were always going to use the fact that rubber is an insulator to defeat Enel. But since this was the first real introduction of Haki, not including Chapter 1 or Shanks vs. Whitebeard, with Mantra, Enel did feel like a god. With the way he was able to use observation Haki with his Devil Fruit, and even with the way he was able to reset his heartbeat, I just loved it. He felt unbeatable, omnipotent, omnipresent, inevitable, a true pseudo-god. This arc took the wonder and adventure part of One Piece up a level for me, and I'll always love it. For all of you that only recently started reading / watching One Piece, I first caught up to the weekly release when it was in Water 7. So I experienced this arc weekly. And there were so many big things that happened, and having to wait week by week was so frustrating. It was the first time that I had a hard time waiting. We had seen some despicable villains in One Piece and seen them do some bad things, but this was the first turning point for me to see how evil this world was going to be. You start to understand why the fishmen would hate humans. We are introduced to the evilest and detestable pieces of garbage that is St. Charles and the rest of the reprehensible celestial dragons. They are the worst that the One Piece world has to offer. We also get introduced to the right-hand man of the king, the Dark King Rayleigh, with one of the most badass intros showing off his conqueror's haki. We got confirmation that the Roger Pirates did learn the true history of the world. They first show us what Vegapunk was capable of with the Pacifista and how strong they are. Centaur first shows up and we see armament haki for the first time. All these things are amazing and bring so much story to One Piece. But two things happen in this arc that places it as my third favorite. Of course, we meet the supernovas. These are the ones that are rival to the crew that we've been following to this point. This opens so much world to me. We had only seen one story, one side of it. And here are 8 of the crews with their own stories, and one crew had a captain with a higher bounty than Luffy. This is a shonen anime. We expect competition for the endgame of the main character, but this was 500 chapters into the story. And suddenly Oda was like, bam, here are 8 other captains that want to be the Pirate King, 8 other crews that have notoriety and strength. This was their competition to the throne. Then we get reminded of the powers of the Admiral. We were just introduced to these supernovas, rivals to the main characters we were following, and they get obliterated as if they were nothing. Cesaro didn't even break a sweat. The gap of power shows how far these pirates were from the top. And it isn't just the admirals. Kuma, the warlord, shows us the difference in power as well. Even though Luffy had defeated 2 warlords already, in front of them stood one that was on a different level. The Straw Hats had to muster everything they had to defeat a Pacifista, which was just a mere copy of the man that now blocked their way. Kuma relentlessly picked off the Straw Hats one at a time. Luffy watched as each of his crew members, whom he was meant to protect, vanished before his eyes. Luffy, the main character, the protagonist, the one that will be the Pirate King, was nothing but a sad, weak, pathetic excuse of a captain at that moment. I remember the disbelief of what I just read. That day, the Straw Hat Pirates, led by Captain Monkey D. Luffy, were eradicated. Now, this may be a surprise to some of you, but there is a reason this isn't number 1 for me. It has nothing to do with this arc itself, but the arc that made it to number 1 on my list. How can you not love Marineford? It is still the most epic battle that One Piece has shown. It sucks that the rest of the Straw Hats were not involved in this arc, but I did love to see Luffy do what he does on such a grand stage. It's hard to even really know where to begin here, but to play off the last entry, we see how far Luffy is from the top. But Luffy doesn't see it that way. He stands side by side with Whitebeard as if he was his equal. He confronts warlords and admirals. He stands up to Garp, Sengoku. He shows the world that he has the disposition of a king. He stamps his mark on the world. Despite all that was around him and the enemy before him, he willed his way to Ace and was able to set him free. For a moment we felt joy in Luffy succeeding. This was great after losing in Sabaody and impelled down, having to run away. He finally got a win, and then it was shattered right before him. He sees his brother murdered, protecting him. He felt how weak he was. But Marineford was more than just a Luffy show. We have seen the power of 2 of the admirals. Here we see the power of the 3rd admiral, and we see what he can do. But more importantly, we see how one of the Emperors of the Sea stood up against the strongest force we had seen at this point. One of the admirals was enough to defeat all the supernovas, and here was Whitebeard standing toe-to-toe and at moments overpowering him. And it wasn't just Whitebeard, but we see his commanders, the show of power of a Yonku's crew. We see the influence that Whitebeard had on the vast number of people that joined the fight for his cause. We saw the power of a devil fruit unlike anything before. I still remember how in awe I was when Whitebeard demonstrated the Gorgora no Mi and changed the landscape of the war in a very literal way. This was the power of the strongest man in the world, the power that rivaled the Pirate King. There's so much that happened, and it's hard to limit it to just one section here. We still have to mention how distraught Garp was in the internal turmoil that was going on inside of him. Being ripped apart. On one hand, he had his family, the boys he helped raise, and on the other, his morals, his belief, his convictions, everything that makes him who he was. Many of you don't understand how he didn't do anything to save Ace and help Luffy, but I truly understand him. He taught and tried to guide his grandsons on the path in which he thought was the right path, and he saw them turn their back to this, and it led to this moment. It wasn't Garp's fault, but he felt like he failed them. This turmoil made me love Garp. If he was too much one way or another, it wouldn't feel real to me. When Ace dies at the hands of Akihino, the emotions that run down his face, he wanted to kill him. Then we see Sengoku, his mythical Zoan fruit, the rest of the warlords, the pacifista, the crew that comes from Impel Down, and of course we have Blackbeard. We see San Juan Wolf over Marineford and see how unbelievably gigantic he is. We see Whitebeard die. We see what they do to him. Then Blackbeard shows off the power that we thought was impossible, not only with his Yami Yami no Mi, but then he uses Whitebeard's Gora Gora no Mi. He wielded 2 devil fruits at the same time. He held the strongest Logia and now the strongest Paramecia. This changed the One Piece world and turned it on its head. This started chaos, and if it wasn't for Shanks that showed up to stop the war, who knows what would have happened. This is one of the most chaotic and epic arcs in One Piece, and I think will only really be topped by the end war that is to come when it comes to impacting the story. Now here's where most people will disagree with me. I know that many other arcs are going to be objectively better than Enies Lobby, but this isn't an objective list. This is my list, and there is no other arc that means more to me than this arc. First of all, it is still objectively very good. We get to see many changes here and important revelations. By the time we get to Enies Lobby, Luffy has already shown us his new upgrade with Gear 2nd, but here we get Gear 3rd as well. At first I was not too much of a fan of this concept because I feared it was going down the DBZ route and just going to be one of those things where he goes from about to die to being completely overpowered within one little upgrade. But it didn't go that way. Luffy still struggled to beat Lucci at the end. But we also get to see an upgrade for Zoro and Azura, Sanji with Diablo Gambe, I can never pronounce that properly, Nami's upgraded climb attack, and Usopp, the Sniper King, with his new staff, Kabuto, and of course Chopper with his monster point. We also get a lot of comedy and action, that was all solid all around in this. But of course we get a lot of sadness here too. There are 2 points of sadness for me in this arc. When Mary comes out to the battlefield on her last-ditch effort to guide the crew that she loves to safety, only to finally break down once she completes her mission. It's amazing, but heartbreaking. Oda made me cry over a fictional ship. It was an incredible show of storytelling. But when we get to see Robin's backstory and the sad life that she had to live, being called a monster at such a young age, and being treated so poorly by the people that were her guardians, she had some joy in studying history with the other archaeologists, but even that was taken away from her. She finally gets to see her mother for the first time in years, and that gets taken away from her. Everyone she knew was eradicated. She only survived through the sacrifices of one of her only friends. She lost everything, and then was hunted down for the rest of her life, jumping from group to group, betrayal to betrayal, never trusting anyone, until one crew helped her believe again. She finally found a group that she wanted them to survive over her. She turned herself in for their sake. She gave up her life for them. But Luffy and crew did not accept that. Luffy declared war on the government, made himself a target to save Robin. He didn't care who was in front of him. He was going to save his Nakama. But what always impacted me and truly got me was that Luffy wasn't only trying to save Robin physically, but wanted her to admit that she wanted to live. He wanted to save her emotionally, mentally. Let her know that it's okay to want to live, to trust her friends, to never give up. When she screams she wants to live, it always makes you cry. If you have watched my last video, you know I struggle with anxiety and depression. And when I was in high school, it was one of my darkest times. This scene means so much because I still wanted to live, but I didn't know how. I learned to just keep going and know that things can get better. It may call me dramatic, but to me, this scene saved me. It is and always will be my favorite arc. Thank you for giving me your time. This was The Sad Pirate King. Thank you, and stay safe.